All right. Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Cambry. Thank you. I'm about to do the thing that I've wanted to do since I've been at Appleby. I've said before to anyone who will listen that the most powerful moments I've had here have been during chapel speeches. I've been lifted higher than I could have imagined in this very special place. I've seen a student facing a very difficult medical situation who admitted that he was weak and he needed to shift his focus from a long, happy life to a short, happy life. Another student brought me to tears with a story of bravely facing what is commonly thought of as a disability. And I've heard stories of acceptance and embracing yourself and others. Most importantly, as hearts are being laid bare, I've heard the truth, the beautiful truth, and it reverberates. So what can I offer? You're asking, how can this guy give us something unique? Did he fight through adversity and will he inspire us with his story? How will this be anything different than the blah, blah, blah we get in class or grade band? And how can anyone that handsome have any problems or obstacles to overcome? These are all great questions, especially the last one. Only you can determine the answers when I'm finished. But I will say that, like the ones who have bravely gone before me, I will tell you my story. I will give you the truth that I think you can handle hearing and that I think I can handle sharing. There may be some details I have to leave out to preserve my privacy or as a condition of my parole. I was never convicted. I'd like to talk to you today about adapting. To adapt can mean a few different things. To many, adapting might mean adjusting to a new condition or fitting in a way. Adapt or die. The African pixie frog can burrow in the ground after the rainy season and seal itself in a bag of its own mucus until it rains again. That's adapting to a condition. But we're not frogs. We're people. We're busy people. We have things to do. We have snapbook stories to maintain. It's not practical. I prefer to focus on the other definition of adapt, and that is to make something suitable for new use or purpose. Make something your own. That way, you can still be you without sitting in a bag of mucus. Too far, sorry. We spend our lives adapting to life. Changes are being thrown at us all the time, and we have to adapt to them. Really, adapting is learning. We're told that we have to learn from our mistakes, and really, I see a mistake as a temporary lapse in adaptation. There was a rule or expectation that we didn't adapt to, and hopefully we learn from it. Believe it or not, I've made some of these mistakes in my life. I've been given many opportunities to adapt in all of my 28 years on earth, and sometimes, Sometimes I think I've done it successfully, but why talk about those times? They're the boring ones. When I was a kid, I moved a lot. I'd like to be able to tell you that I come from a family of circus folk who had a tap-dancing monkey, and that's why we were on the move so much. That'd be a pretty sweet story, but it wouldn't be true, and this moment is about speaking the beautiful truth. My dad was a teacher, and my mom was a minister, so we moved around a lot. We never had a monkey, although that still remains a goal of mine. In moving 8 times by the time I finished high school, I was the new kid a lot. I also had the stigma in a small town of being the minister's kid. And contrary to what you might assume, there aren't many social advantages to that. My experience as a new kid is not unique to many of you, and many of you likely handled it or are handling it much better than I did. I was a pretty shy kid who only thought the funny thoughts and didn't have the guts to say them out loud until much later in life. It took me a long time to find my place, to fit in, to adapt. This came with the hardships that you might imagine. Some schools or classes or friend groups didn't want a new kid in them. My first year living in a little tiny town in Saskatchewan was not fun. It was in Saskatchewan. I was bullied. I didn't know to call it that because it might have just been a punch on the shoulder or a slap on the back of the head whenever you walked by. But it was bullying because I didn't have any control. He had all of it. And I did what any non-confrontational new kid would do. I pretended to be sick and I stayed home a lot. That was how I adapted. I immersed myself in a bag of mucus and waited. I'm going to stop mentioning that. Sadly, it worked. He moved on, and eventually I was fine. I had enough friends, and then I did the thing that I regret the most, the thing that shows the most weakness. I let myself become a bully to other kids. I'm ashamed to admit to everyone here, and that's how I adapted. I became the thing that I feared. And that's assimilation, not adaptation. Shame on me. But eventually I figured it out. The optimist in me would like to think that we as humans can figure things out by learning. In some strange way, I think I had to see both sides to figure it out. The person in my life who helped me sort out many of these lessons was my dad. My dad was everything to me. He died of pancreatic cancer 12 years ago, and I still haven't fully adapted to that, and likely never will. I measure everything I do in my life by how I think my dad would react. He was generous with encouragement and approval, and it always meant everything. Many of the best things in my life have happened in the last 12 years. I married my wife, I put out an album of my own, I continued to play and record with my band, I did a couple commercials and some television, and I even got to be in a movie. My twins, Lainey and Charlie, were born, and they've grown into weird and wonderful kids. I went back to school, became a teacher like my dad, and got a job at an amazing school with amazing people. This one. I've had lots of awkward family moments that would have just required a wink or a nod from my dad to let me know that everything was in its right place. My life has been good, and he loved the good stuff. I have adapted to life without him by keeping him with me in my heart, as anyone would do after the loss of someone special. I also have a pair of his shoes that I've worn on a few different occasions just to bring him along with me to calm me down. I wore them when I proposed to my wife. I wore them to the rehearsal for our wedding. They didn't go with my suit, so I wasn't allowed to wear them at the wedding. I wore them when Lainey and Charlie were born, and then I put them away because he was with me anyway. But I brought them along today because I felt like I needed them here with me. I'm wearing them. You can't see them. They're on my feet. So that's just how I adapted to my dad's diagnosis, his illness, and his death. He actually did most of the work. He was told that he had 6 to 18 months to live following his diagnosis, and that most of the time that he had would be pretty lousy. He had a period of time, we all did, where he just let it suck. Sometimes life sucks, and you have to let it. You can be optimistic and strong tomorrow, but today is going to suck. I've given that advice to my friends, to my kids, to my students in my classroom, and in my office. It's okay to wallow in the suckitude of it all for a while. Then he adapted. He figured out what was important, and he focused on it while he was well enough to do so. He wanted to know his family was going to be okay when he was gone. He put things in place to make it easier on my mom, not that it's ever been easy. He made his life his own. And during this time, he wrote me a letter after I'd gone to Kingston to visit them. And he said in the letter that he's still growing and learning, even though his life is anything but kind. He also talked about the relationship that he had with his own father and how there was a limit to what they were able to share with each other. And it wasn't until his father's final days that they were able to finally open up to each other. So my dad made sure that was never going to happen again. There's a song by Ron Sexsmith called Gold in Them Hills that I listened to a lot when my dad was sick. I've always wanted to sing it in chapel, but I didn't think I'd ever be able to get through it in one piece. There's a line in the song that says, "Don't lose heart, give the day a chance to start." And my dad gave every day a chance to start. As I mentioned, I've had 3 huge changes in my life since my dad died. I got married, had 2 kids, and became a teacher. I've learned a lot about adaptation and change and learning since becoming my wife's husband. It's all the relationship stuff I've ever known, and then all the stuff I never knew, every day, all at the same time, always. Every day is new and different and presents its own set of challenges. Some challenges are met with victory, some with defeat, and some will have to be settled another day. Being Lainey and Charlie's dad has been the adventure that I hoped it would be. I can't imagine not being their dad. It's my greatest achievement, and being with my family brings me the most happiness. Kids make you adapt in a hurry and don't give you a lot of time to think about it. Add in a lack of sleep, and it's pretty easy to lose it. I know that our kids watch my wife and I and how we react to things. They see if we freak out or if we're calm. Earlier this year, my kids suffered their first significant loss when our neighbor Kenny died. Kenny's house is attached to ours, and our porches are right up against each other. And when the kids were brought home from the hospital after they were born, he was outside having a smoke, and I think he was out there for 9 years after that. They loved him unconditionally and said he was their best friend on the street. And when Kenny died, our family was very sad together. But the kids were able to think of a better place where Kenny was, and maybe he would get to meet my dad there. They undo me every time, little turds. Sorry. Recently, our patience and resolve has been tested as my son Charlie has developed a stutter when he speaks. It started rather innocently and wasn't too pronounced, as we thought he just needed to slow down and take a breath before speaking when he was excited. And this boy's always excited. He loves everyone and everything. He's like a puppy. We thought his stutter was just a little nervous tick and he would evolve out of it, and he likely will. That said, Charlie is aware that he does it, and that's what made us worry. We were traveling to the East Coast this past summer, and I told him that he and Lainey were in charge of ordering food in Quebec because their French was way better than Mom and Dad's. He hesitated and said, "Dad, I think Lainey should do it, because what if I do the This was a parenting adaptation opportunity where I had to appear that what he said didn't break my heart, which it did, and assure him that he could handle it and thereby maintain the confidence of an 8-year-old boy who was pretty much fearless up to this point. Then I imagined in that moment that he was going into grade 3 and might be teased at school because little kids tease each other. Charlie has adapted. He can catch himself and slow himself down. His sister, his mom, and I have adapted by not finishing his sentences, and we try not to look bothered or worried about it. His chill has made us chill. And that brings me to here, my most recent adaptation. Appleby is my first teaching job, my first big boy job. I got here 5 years ago when many of you in the S2 class were in M1. It's taken some getting used to, saying things like S2 and M1, for instance. The pace of the school, Outlook, OneNote, Sunday shutdowns, meatless days, Reach, am I right? It's a far cry from the musician's life that I had before of sleeping in until whenever and filling my days with whatever. But I can't think of a better place to spend my time. It's a wonderful place full of wonderful people, students and faculty. I'm so lucky to be a witness and hopefully a participant in your growth and, yes, your adaptation. I see your bravery, your resilience, your strength, and your determination. See new students adapt to a new school or a new country or a new language. You adapt to change, to physical health challenges, to mental health challenges, to shifts in your friendships. I see you adapting to things that you shouldn't have to at your age, to loss, pressure, distance, heartbreak, betrayal. I've cheered for you. I've laughed for you, laughed at you, and cried for you. You've helped me immeasurably by growing my confidence, my patience, my empathy, and my sense of justice in what's right. When your heart breaks, my heart breaks. And when your heart is mended, my heart is mended. You have helped me adapt and make this place my home and my own. I am and always will be grateful for everything you give me, even when you don't think you do. Thank you for your kindness. And because I love to hear you sing, loudly and proudly, let's all sing 423, How Great Thou Art, because thou art great.